Hi, Miguel.
Hi.
To bring it back to Eze, there's been a lot of talk about, especially from Crystal Palace fans, about him being sort of better in the latter stages of the season. He scored registered 24 goals in the season, his last 31 Prem appearances between March and May. Is that something you're aware of? And do you feel like he can really kick on between now and the end of the season?
He can do, and obviously now as well he's got many more months and games and an understanding of what the game required for him to make the difference, and yeah, I hope that that's the case, and now he just smashes from here to the end of the season.
You mentioned, obviously, you spoke about earlier, that you feel like you know how to get the best out of him now. Have you had to motivate him? You know, he struggled for a long period in between those two Tottenham games in terms of goals and assists. Have you had to motivate him, and how have you had to motivate him if you have?
Motivation is never an issue, and I believe that you have to motivate a player, we have a big problem. Because that motivation is what? Just a talk, someone that inspires you for a minute or an hour. How much does it last? I think the biggest motivation that he has is the reason why he came to this club, because he really feels attached and belonging here, and the rest is moments that you have to have through your career. When you move to a different club, navigate with that and make sure you do everything that you possibly can to make it work.
And finally, Tom.
Hi, Mikel. Victor's been popular in the press, so I've got a couple more on him for you. With it being Chelsea on the weekend, Didier Drogba, of course, was a big goal scorer in this fixture between Arsenal and Chelsea. In his first two seasons, he scored 16 goals in his first season across all comps and 16 in his second season. Victor's only one behind that. Do you think comparisons like that, and I know you don't tend to like comparing players, but does that context provide maybe some insight into expectations around strikers?
Yes, I mean, it's always the case about who you compare with. You know, I have a beautiful apartment, but this guy has the biggest mansion in the world. so my apartment is terrible, you know. But I can be so proud that I worked so hard to get and pay the debt of my apartment and refurbished it, and I have a beautiful kitchen. I go to his house and I get depressed. So it's depending on the eyes that you look at it. So I think what he's doing is improvable, yes, but I think his contribution, I think it's been important so far.
Welcome back to Sunday Supplement. Welcome back to Jonathan, Martin and Jack as well. Let's focus now on the big game on Super Sunday at the Emirates. Arsenal against Chelsea. The Sunday Telegraph's splash is a picture of Antoine Semenyo following Manchester City's victory over Leeds at Ellen Road. And the headline is, "Over to you, Arteta." Now, there's an interesting piece, Martin, in the Sunday Mirror. Top Vic, a work of art. Now, for all the criticism he's received, Victor Gyokeres has been possibly one of the most talked about players and one of the most talked about strikers so far this season. Tom Canton's piece has actually focused on a comparison with Didier Drogba when Drogba first arrived at Chelsea. He says Victor Gyokeres has the backing of Mikel Arteta as the Arsenal striker closes in on a Didier Drogba record. So for that, it doesn't seem too bad. Drogba finished both his first two seasons with 16 goals in all competitions. Gyokeres currently has 15 in all competitions. For all the criticism he's received, could he yet be the man to fire Arsenal to title glory? Because remember, we keep praising Hugo Ekitike, and I'm sure we'll be coming to Ekitike in Liverpool later. He's only got one more goal than Gyokeres in all competitions so far this season.
Well, Gyokeres now is, I mean, certainly going into this weekend, I haven't looked at it since, but going into this weekend, he is in the top 5 goal scorers in the Premier League this season. I mean, I think there might be about 4 of them on the same on the same total as he's got, but he's in the top 5, which is interesting because no team has ever won the Premier League without a goal scorer in the top 10. And before this recent run of Gyokeres, he was well outside it, and Arsenal didn't have anyone in the top 10. So it's quite interesting, his sort of recent resurgence. It is true about Drogba. Drogba's first season with Chelsea, Drogba's remembered quite rightly as one of his first season at Chelsea was regarded as underwhelming, to the extent that that's why they buy Shevchenko. Abramovich offers Marino Shevchenko. because they don't think that the guy they've signed they don't think it's working out. And then, of course, it starts working out. But, yeah, look, if they... I've said it a little while ago, if they win the league, if they win the Champions League, they win either, really. You can't turn around and say the striker, this is a complete failure. You've got to give him another season to see if this comes on. I wasn't impressed with Gyokeres at the start of the season either. I don't think many people were. A lot of his goals were, they were the sort of unnecessary ones. They were the third and fourth goal when they've beaten someone 5-0 or something like that. But his performance in the week, I thought, was superb. His performance against Tottenham was absolutely superb. He did exactly what you want from a striker. See him against Chelsea today.
Is he convincing you, Joe?
I still don't think he's as good as the sort of player Arsenal need up front. I haven't thought that all season. I think that when you mentioned Ekitike earlier. If you look at the level of someone like an Ekitike or an Isak who just moves a bit better, I think that would probably be a better fit for the sort of football that Arsenal want to play. So no, I don't think he's been amazing, but equally, I think there is a value in having someone who can make a bit of a nuisance of themselves, score. There's a huge value if you can score ugly goals, if you can score goals that maybe don't look as easy on the eye. And there are some strikers who've had great careers out of being able to score that kind of goal. Like I remember when Manchester City signed Aiden Dzeko from I think it was from Wolfsburg in 2011. Like he looked incredibly clunky for the first sort of 6 or 12 months at City, but he had a knack of scoring important and difficult goals in games where more talented players were not necessarily at their top. And I just wonder, watching Gyokeres, whether that's the kind of player that he could become, somebody who they can, even if he's never going to be pleasing on the eye, I think everybody would accept that now, he can still make a difference in games. I mean, I also think he's had this huge kind of, almost like a narrative 180 in the course of the last few weeks, largely off the back of a brilliant performance against Tottenham. Like, I think that, I don't know whether he will find it is circumstances to that game. Tottenham made it really easy for him, or whether that might catalyse a genuine improvement in performance, which we might see in games such an interesting test case.
The stylistics of it are so important, like the aesthetics. Ekitike looks good. In fact, he looks much more of what Arsenal fans would expect their number 9, or expect or want their Arsenal number 9 to look like. Gyokeres, he sticks his toe out, he sticks his thigh out. His goal against Spurs was pretty much the only time he actually gets a chance to run at players, to run at defenders, and side of goal. That's on Tottenham as much as it is Gyokeres. So I think he fails in terms of the fact that he doesn't look like what an Arsenal number 9 to look like, and he's not really a stylistic fit for that team either. So to score, what is it 13, 15 goals in his first, isn't built to his strengths, frankly. It's not a bad effort. And I think, like Martin says, you probably want to give him another season to see if it continues.
And the thing about as you say, about the Arsenal fans, and the Arsenal fans are desperate for beauty points. They are really, really saying they're a set-piece team, they're a corner team. It's all about having a bundle in the 6-yard area. For someone to say what wonderful football they play and everything like that, to have a centre forward who isn't pretty, to have a that's driving them mad as well.
Do they have a point though? Because when they do score from set pieces, there's lots of focus on it.
Yeah.
But when they don't score from, like they did against Tottenham Hotspur, that narrative doesn't go away. It's not like Arsenal have played absolutely brilliantly.
No, I know. It annoys them, and that makes everyone happy. But that's true. Look, they're a much better team than they're given credit for. They're not They want everyone to think of them the way that they thought of, say, City or Klopp's Liverpool or whatever, and And Gyokeres doesn't feed into that narrative. Ekitike looks like a racehorse, doesn't he? You know, when you know the way the man plays, Isak the same. They're racehorses. Whereas Gyokeres isn't. But at the moment, if you're top of the league and you're top of the, you're best team in the Champions League, you can't turn around and say the centre forward hasn't worked because he's done something.
We talk about the comparison, Jack, that Martin made, when they talk about Liverpool and City and Arsenal. I guess that's symptomatic about the noise that surrounds Arsenal, particularly when they're trying to end this, 22-year wait to win a Premier League title. But alongside that noise, you've got a manager who, demeanor in the touchline in recent seasons, feels like at the moment he is trying to make, is Mikel Arteta, a conscious effort to stay level. I did speak to him on Friday, and he does seem to be a picture of calm just now. And he actually did say going up and down like this is completely unsustainable. How big a role do you think he's going to play? Not only, clearly, the teams he's going to pick and the games that he's going to win, but the actual way that he is perceived and how he behaves, not only on the touchline, but in news conferences as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think he must have known, he must know what everybody knows, right? Which is that the Arsenal players have at times been playing as if they are under huge amounts of pressure which they have put on themselves. And the best possible example of that is the Wolves game, 2-0 up away from home against the worst team in the league. And they looked so terrified of what should have been a really dominant position, and they threw it away. The way they wilted under pressure, the home game against Manchester United, the game against Brentford recently. So he must be incredibly aware of that, and I'm sure he must be thinking, how can I help not make this harder for my players? Because there's definitely been moments in the last few years where you've seen Arteta getting so frantic on the touchline, and you must, it's only natural that players will take their emotional cues from what they see in the technical area. And I've often thought, as many other people have, that it can't be helpful for Arsenal to have the manager looking so frantic and so tense. And so maybe he has thought that the best way to lessen that psychological burden on the players is if he can just stay as calm as possible in public. Maybe that will try to keep the players on a fairly even keel. Because I think if the players can kind of solve that psychological issue, I think they'll win the league. I think they are simply better than City. I think that they should get more points than City over the remaining games. I think if they don't win the league, the main reason will be because they have felt too much of that pressure, as they showed in that second half in the Wolves game 2 weeks ago.
Jonathan, there is another team in this game this afternoon, of course. It's a massive game for Arsenal. It's a huge game for Chelsea as well. I want to direct you to the Sunday Telegraph piece by Matt Law. The headline there is that proof that Chelsea are falling further behind Arsenal. He says at the start of last month, Liam Rosenior told Chelsea fans the club were not far away from competing with Arsenal at the top of the Premier League table. Rosenior is entitled to feel optimistic about the future, particularly as Chelsea will bank on many of their young players improving. But the club must beat Arsenal and extract a much bigger return from their signings for his promise to be anything but a pipe dream. Has Matt got a point there?
Yeah, he does. He usually does. And I think the fact that the gulf between Arsenal and Chelsea has widened is unmistakable. Anyone with eyes can see that Chelsea, I think, who've shown flashes of promise. They showed huge flashes of promise under Maresca, and it always seemed to be slightly illusory. And we talk about the time, the time that coaches get at Chelsea, the sense of permanent chaos, and the way that the coaches essentially they're having to exist in an environment where they know they're almost kind of the bottom feeders of the organisation. All the power lies with at the sporting director level, with the ownership, and that they are essentially expendable. This is the real gulf that with Arsenal. Arteta. There's a great piece in the Sunday Times today about the backroom team behind Arteta, and how that club is now essentially engineered towards. He's the auteur. Arteta is the auteur of Arsenal. He gets so much and time and latitude than any Chelsea coach can ever hope to get under the current regime. And so yes, time is one thing, and Arteta did get time, but it's also the opportunity to stamp your mark on the team. Rosenior, from what we've seen, he looks like a bright coach. He looks like a coach with a lot of promise, with tactical ideas, good communicator. The players seem to be responding to him. How do you translate that into, a good season, 2 good seasons? And I think that's the point where Chelsea have dropped the ball so often in the past, because their default mode is more chaos, more signings, more turbulence, more churn.
But I don't think Chelsea, from the outside, it looks to me like Chelsea have decided that they never want a manager as powerful as Arteta.
Yeah.
Like they have effectively created a model in which the manager is effectively disposable, right? It's changeable.
That's what went wrong with Maresca. Maresca won the Club World Cup, and he thought, well, what this gives me is a little bit more power. This, they will have to listen to me now. We're the world champions. What this great big thing on our shirt. We are the world champions. Now they'll listen to me. And he found out that that's not how it works at Chelsea. It doesn't matter what you win. And it'll be very interesting if Liam Senior was to win something, and whether he would then think, as managers tend to do, well, I've been successful, now this gives me more of a say in recruitment and in all of this. And it didn't with Maresca, and that's where it all went wrong. Chelsea, it's very... The problem that Chelsea might have going down the line is the same problem that Arsene Wenger had with that final generation of young Arsenal talent, really good Arsenal talent like Fabregas and people like that, where it was going to be, you look at what this team will be, you look at what this team will become. But then it wasn't actually winning anything and stuff, and then your best players get picked off. So you look at Cole Palmer or Caicedo or people like that, and you think, right, how long could they go with a Chelsea team that at the moment might not be in the Champions League next season? Yeah. How long is that going to last before someone just comes in and says, this 7-year plan that you think you've got, Real Madrid are in for, or Barcelona are in for Caicedo, and those players suddenly think, right, well, I've got more chance there than here, and then they're going to cut up rough, and then all of that 7-year contract goes out the window.
Yeah, let's get straight into it then, and let's focus on the Mail on Sunday's back page, where it focuses on the events at Ellen Road during Manchester City's victory over Leeds United. Their headline is "Show Some Respect," and it is to do with Pep slamming abusive fans for booing Ramadan break. I just want to direct you, Jonathan, first of all, to a piece by Rory Smith in The Observer. His match report is effectively focusing on what happened during that Ramadan break. He says, "It was not everyone, it never is. In front of the press box at the back of the West Stand, the prime spot for tracking body language of a passing visiting manager, a handful of squabbles broke out. Supporters taking their neighbours to task for joining in with the abuse. That does not make the fact that it happened any less shameful, any less appalling." So we've seen the booing. I mean, when we've seen the statements come out as well, when, as is always the case from Kick It Out, from various authorities saying that this is disappointing, people need educating, but do the authorities have the opportunity here to maybe make an even bigger statement to eradicate this?
Yeah, we're talking about consequences here, aren't we? Like, tangible consequences. 3 players, I think, Ryan Cherky and Ryan Nouri, they want a drink of water, because of their faith. They haven't eaten or drunk all day, and it is no inconvenience to anyone. They're not getting an unfair advantage out of it. It's not a sporting edge. They're just having a drink. It's about a minute out of everyone's day, which is about what it takes to take a long throw these days. And you got the Mail on Sunday there, right? You got the Mail.
Yes.
So you got the Mail on Sunday back page, which is this is about the booing, which is Guardiola is condemned. Show us the front page. Show us the front page of the Mail on Sunday, this is what's on the news bit. This is foreign-born voters stole by-election, blast Farage. So I've been in Gorton and Denton for a couple of weeks covering the by-election, in the aftermath of which there's been a lot of dog whistle accusations about Muslim bloc voting. and the clear insinuation from a lot of elements on the far right that Muslim votes are basically not worth as much as white British ones. This is the climate. This is the atmosphere that we have created over years, possibly over decades, through the open antagonism towards Muslims, towards Islam, which faces no consequences. So we come back to consequences. If people in power, if people with a platform are emboldened to be openly hostile to Muslims and face no consequences for it, that behaviour is going to filter down into the stand. And, it is encouraging that there were Leeds fans who pushed back on this behaviour. It's encouraging that the Leeds assistant manager came out and said, this is not what we want to see. But until there are tangible consequences for this is going to carry on, because we are in a climate now where this behaviour is basically tacitly legitimised.
Martin, Jonathan mentioned it there, tangible consequences. In your paper, The Sunday Times, Jonathan Northcroft was at Ellen Road. His quote in this is, "There was the disgrace, 11 minutes into the game, of a section of supporters booing when they play stop for Muslim players such as Marmoush and Shirky to break their Ramadan fasting. It suggested for all the Premier Leagues and clubs' campaigns around such subjects that inclusivity remains a stranger to certain fans." When it comes to tangible sanctions, it could be within the remit, but are we now talking potentially stadium closure, and that's the only way it's going to stop?
Well, you could talk about that, but the disconnect between fans and what they see, the players that they've got in front of them, how you can have Mo Salah as the best player in our game for so long, and people be ignorant, so ignorant about what the breaking of the fast is and what it represents in athletic terms. How you can have Zinedine Zidane being the greatest footballer on the planet for a time and people still not get that there are Muslims absolutely at the top of football, and it's not some alien thing that they're rejecting. This is not part of our game, it's absolutely part of the game. I've been to test matches in Pakistan that took place during Ramadan, when the fast was broken, when they bring on screens for players, Pakistan players, to have water because it's so hot and it's not actually the time that they should be having water, but you are allowed to have water. It's all of these layers, and the fact people in Ellen Road who found that alien, who found that objectionable, is so disheartening in the modern world. I totally agree with John's point there that there's a timing issue as well after the Gorton and Denton by-election. Without a doubt, there's a timing issue, because there's been a by-election in which the whole narrative since then is this has been swayed by the Muslim vote, the sectarianism vote, sectarian voting, family voting, all of this, and it all bleeds into what you can hear now.
Because Islamophobia has basically become effectively the cost-free form of racism, right? It's become the consequence-free form of racism. It's become almost the acceptable face of racism in the UK, right? It's something that people can say without, or people can say, people can do, people can boo an expression of Islamic faith in the same way that maybe they would not do to other faiths, and nothing comes back. And that's the kind of genesis, for want of a better word, of what we saw yesterday, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, these things don't happen in a vacuum, no. is what I'm saying. And there are a lot of people, you don't have to be openly hostile to Islam, or you don't have to hate all Muslims to engage in behaviour like that. But if you're in a climate where these things are legitimated, then it makes it more likely that your annoyance or your antagonism is going to find voice.
People booed Black Lives Matter as well, by the way. They booed the taking of the knee and all of this sort of stuff. So, in a strange way, it's not surprising, but it is surprising given the context. It is surprising given that it is quite possible that Leeds would be in the market in the summer for a very good player from Africa. well, there's a lot of very good players from Africa who are Muslim. How would they feel about going to Leeds? How you know, I find it mind-boggling that people do not understand what a diverse game this is.
Jack, just picking up on what Martin said, mind-boggling that people don't understand. Does it come down to education, or is it becoming boring? Is it becoming boring now that when there is an incident like this, the narrative is always, oh, people about this?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I certainly think education is valuable, but I also think punishments have a value. I also think people need to want to have their, you know, to have their eyes open to other people and to other cultures and other experiences, which I don't think education is a panacea for solving racism. I think that it goes kind of deeper and broader than that ultimately.
Well, what about those punishments then? What kind of sanctions should be placed on incidents like these?
Well, it's a really good question. I mean, it's not really something that I'm trying to think of precedents. I can't really think of many direct precedents in English football. It's obviously an issue that crops up quite a lot in UEFA competitions, right? Whether it's the England team playing abroad or whether it's in European club competitions, and then there'll be whether it's fines or stadium closures. And obviously in the UK, we like to get on our high horse about the punishments that are handed out for racism cases across Europe. But it's also a question which English football doesn't particularly like. We don't particularly like turning on ourselves, right? It's not something that I can even think of. I mean, am I missing something? I can't even think of a precedent in English club football where there have been any kind of sanction from the Football Association or from the Premier League.
The fast has been, you know, the Muslim players have been breaking the fast during football games for years, and it's nobody cares because it's not really that important in the scheme of things. It's only when, you know, a few fans have decided to make it into an issue that we now have to talk about it, that it becomes back page news.
I've never seen that statement before. I've never seen that put up on players being paused briefly to allow players to play. I think it was just something that happened. You didn't even notice it was happening, and you know it's such a inconsequential. It's not like anyone's sitting down for 6 courses or anything like that. You know, you're taking on a bit of water. You might have a protein bar or something like that. I've never seen that advert. I don't know that announcement before. I don't know why. Just do it.
Well, I mean, it may have been put up
on
that screen because of as a result of the booing.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a football match as a result of the booing.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a football match amongst all of this, of course, which Manchester City did win. Jonathan Northcroft's piece kind of highlights how big a win this was, Martin. These are the games that winners with fights in hostile places, contests where they are not at their best, days when star players are absent, days when there is opportunity and there is pressure, and only 3 points will do. Manchester City had to, and so Manchester City did. No wonder Pep Guardiola celebrated with utmost vindication, waving at the baying Leeds United fans. He knows there is now nothing in it in this title race. It was a frenetic night. It felt like a big win for City. Just how big do you think, if they win the title, it's one of those games when they'll look back on and think, do you remember that night at Ellen Road?
Without a doubt, yeah, because all the talk before it was that Ellen Road is the toughest ground to go to once the sun sets. You know, they've got this fantastic record there in night games. So this was seen as a big test for Manchester City. Then they lose Haaland, and you know they're the Erling Haaland team in the way that Pep once called Tottenham the Harry Kane team. They're very much the Erling Haaland team. And they found a way through. The defence was exceptional as well, which Man City's defence hasn't been. So yeah, it's huge. I mean, and the fact that, look, it's in Arsenal's hands, but it's also in City's hands. If City win all their games, they win the league. Same as if Arsenal win all their games, they win the league. So it was very big. Neither team can afford to make a misstep, and this was seen as a potential misstep. Strangely, more than Arsenal's game against Chelsea today.
I would dispute, by the way, that this wasn't City at their best. because I think there's this idea that there's some mythical god-tier level of City football that they are just, they're going to click and produce at some point. And I think, is this level of football in the room with us right now? Well, they weren't at their best here. They weren't at their best against Newcastle. They weren't at their best, second half against Fulham. So I think this is we have to accept this is basically what City are now. You look at when Arsenal went to Elland Road. Basically forgot about this because it didn't really fit this kind of predetermined narrative that Arsenal are bottling it and City are grinding their way. But no, Arsenal destroyed them. Like it was 4-0, right? And I think right. And I think that is a much better indication of the gulf between the Arsenal and City right now.
I think that it's such a weird game in the sense that for the first 25 minutes, it was like the bad City of this season in the sense they couldn't control the game. They looked a bit exposed physically. Leeds could have had 2 or 3 goals in the first 25 minutes. But then after City had weathered that initial burst, they looked incredibly calm and in total control in a way which they often have not this season. That was, I think, probably the most impressive thing was it was so much of this season watching City, you thought they haven't got the control they've had in the past. They're not as good on the ball, they're not as good physically. But yet watching them yesterday, it was the first time when I thought this actually does look like a classic City team. They are they are controlling the game. They're controlling possession. They're really strong physically, and I think so much of that comes down to the fact that Rodri looked like his old self yesterday in the middle of the pitch, and that gives City a kind of level of security and protection they haven't had for so much of this season. So I think that's why they managed to get back to something that looked like their old standards yesterday.
I think with City, what you're comparing them to is probably the highest standard that we've seen in English football in 20, 30 years. So unless they're hitting that. And it's, no team's going to hit that. Maybe, in another 10 years, no team might hit that. Unless they're hitting that, everyone's going, oh, they're not themselves. But they're still really good. They're still really good.
Jonathan, Mike McGrath from the Sunday Telegraph was at that game as well. We've just seen Antoine Semenyo's winning goal there. Really well-crafted goal by City. This was a retort from Manchester City to those calling them the Erling Haaland team. Without their talismanic striker for the first time in the Premier League this season, they found a different way to win and keep the pressure on leaders Arsenal. Martin mentioned that they could look back on this game and think that was a significant moment. Could we be looking back at that January transfer window? Jack's mentioned how good they were in defence. Mark Gahey in that defence. Yeah. And up front, the winning goal from another January signing in Semenyo.
Yeah, and I think this has been happening. I think this kind of shift has been happening for maybe a year or two now, where I think for a while City's recruitment was very specifically, attacking recruitment was very specific players who could make Haaland look good. The signing of Grealish is a perfect example of this, or Savinho or Doku. And I think in the last 2 or 3 windows, we're now seeing players brought in, like Semenyo or Cherki or Marmoush, who are a goal threat in their own right. Semenyo is going to be a goal threat in his own right, and I think that is. It's what gives City, I think, a lot more layers than they did certainly at the start of the season. And players like Gahey, Donnarumma, who has, I think, quietly been one of the signings of the season. He's just made them look so much more secure. And I think a few raised eyebrows. Where does he fit in? He's earned them maybe half a dozen points this season. So that's what I think is giving City their strength at the moment. They've bought in like Premier League hardened, Premier League ready players who are basically slotting in and performing straight away.
It's just fundamentally a more individualistic approach than they've ever had before under Pep. It's a team of and built around very, very high quality individuals rather than a team which necessarily puts the system or the thinking behind the system first and foremost. That's how you go from Ederson to Donnarumma, right? Because, in an ideological sense, it's a complete 180. Like they're 2 completely different types of goalkeeper. But this season, it feels to me like Pep's just said, let's just go out and get the best individuals that we can and hope that we can encourage them to perform at their best level. He
was ahead of the curve with Donnarumma. Yeah. He saw what was coming. He's the smartest guy. He saw what was coming. He saw that it was the throw-ins, the corners, the set pieces. Right, what we want is a fellow who's going to come off his line, sort a few people out, great big guy. That's what we need. And now everyone's looking at that and going, see, that's what we need. We need a fella like Donnarumma.
Does this suggest to you that
He
Guardiola
actually knows what he's doing?
No, that Guardiola is on has earmarked this as his last. I mean, we've been talking about his future, but it strikes me as the team you would build. Not for the future, but for the extreme present, when you have to go out on a high.
And I think in that sense, the signing of Donnarumma actually reminds me quite a lot of when Ferguson signed Van Persie in 2012, right? You've got you know it's your last year. You just want to. You're not thinking about 5 years down the line. You're thinking about winning the league. And I think that when I look at the Donnarumma signing, especially given it's such, it does make me think this is his Van Persie moment.
Yeah. 2 points now, the gap